Outside the world of sports, few knew the name Donald Sterling prior to the spring of 2014. But after a recording of the LA Clippers owner berating his mistress for being seen in public with African-American men was leaked to the press, everyone knew Sterling.
Once the cat's out of the bag, you can't put it back in.
Am I entitled to one mistake? Am I, after 35 years?
An NBA team owner, a married man, and a billionaire. And some would say, a racist.
He created a tough environment for anybody trying to run the team.
On this episode of Fortune Fights, husband and wife attorneys and frequent advisors to celebrity heirs Danielle and Andy Mayoris explore how Sterling was able to hang on to his assets despite a public debacle that destroyed his image and resulted in his banishment from the NBA. In April of 2014, Los Angeles Clippers owner and real estate mogul Donald Sterling found himself embroiled in one of the worst scandals in professional sports history. Media experts and attorneys Andy and Danielle Mayoris guide us through Sterling's lifetime of legal skirmishes, which came to a head when his mistress, V. Stiviano, released an audio recording of the 80-year-old billionaire making racially charged statements. The recording was all over the news.
People call you and tell you that I have black people on my Instagram, and it bothers you.
Yeah, it bothers me a lot that you want to broadcast that you're associating with black people. Do you have to?
Sterling became an outcast, not only in the NBA, but within his own family and around the world. As the saga unfolded, the public learned about his long history of infidelity, discrimination, and racial bias going back more than 4 decades. Sitting atop a billion-dollar empire, Sterling would turn out to be his own worst enemy, with only his wife Shelly to pick up the pieces of what he tore apart.
Donald Sterling operated in his own world under his own moral code for many, many years until it finally caught up with him. And once it did, everything he built came crashing down around him.
Sterling was born Donald Tokowitz in Chicago in 1934. When he was 2 years old, his parents moved the family to Los Angeles.
They landed in Boyle Heights, a low-income neighborhood in East LA. Donald went to public schools and eventually enrolled in law school, paying his way by working at a furniture store. There he met the owner's daughter, Rochelle Shelly Stein, and married her in 1955.
Donald and Shelly Sterling decided to change their name to Sterling from Tokowitz in 1959. They figured that it would help them in business dealings moving forward.
So, a year later, Sterling began his own practice as a personal injury and divorce attorney.
He started off representing a lot of people from his old neighborhood in Boyle Heights. And while those cases weren't a lot monetary-wise, he was doing tons of them. Eventually, his reputation grew, and so did the caliber of his cases, and his clients became more along the lines of the Beverly Hills crowd.
At 26, Sterling represented Michael Selzman in his 1962 divorce from Hollywood starlet Carol Lindley. At the time, Lindley was a rising star at 20th Century Fox and was backed by a powerful legal team. Yet it was Sterling who seemed to be in control.
Sterling came on strong in the divorce negotiations and ended up winning $25,000 for his client Selzman, which today would be worth more than $250,000. Now, Lindley did get the house and $1 a year in alimony, but overall, this was a very strong example of Sterling's legal skills.
Donald Sterling claims to have tried 10,000 cases, which brought him millions of dollars, and that, of course, propelled him forward in the business world.
Outside the courtroom, Sterling began growing an empire, getting into real estate in 1961. At the time, the Los Angeles housing market was in a slump, making it the perfect opportunity for buyers like Donald Sterling, who could afford to pay in cash. His first purchase was a 26-unit Beverly Hills apartment building that he picked up for just over $500,000.
Once Donald Sterling saw how much money there was to be made in real estate, he started snatching up properties left and right. His plan was to buy when the market was soft, refinance when the properties appreciated, and take every last loophole along the way to reduce property taxes and capital gains.
Using this business plan, he bought dozens of properties all over Los Angeles, from Beverly Hills and the posh neighborhood of Westwood to Koreatown.
In 1976, he began leasing the California Bank building in Beverly Hills, an Art Deco masterpiece built in 1930 by Louis B. Mayer.
Sterling negotiated a 99-year lease with the Mayer estate that required him to pay a small annual fee and 15% of any rental income that he brought in. Only there was a catch. Sterling himself occupied the top 2 floors of the building, and there were no other tenants, so there was no money coming in at all, which meant that he virtually had to pay nothing to the building owners.
His hope was that with very little money coming in from the building, the owners would be forced to sell. And who would be there to scoop up the property? None other than Donald Sterling himself.
His plan eventually paid off. He purchased the building 15 years later and renamed it Sterling Plaza.
A lot of people at the time compared him to Donald Trump. In fact, he was even referred to as Trump of the West Coast, or the other Donald.
By the mid-70s, Sterling had an estimated net worth in the millions, but he hadn't built that fortune alone.
There's no question that Shelly Sterling was instrumental to her husband's success. She was involved in every aspect of their real estate business. Everything from collecting rent checks from tenants to remodeling buildings and even advising him on new acquisitions. Shelly Sterling married her husband when he didn't have a penny to his name, and she was critical to his success.
Shelly was a part owner of the real estate company called Beverly Hills Properties, and her name was on many of the deeds. She was really there every step of the way, helping her husband build this massive real estate portfolio.
She truly was more than his wife. She was his bona fide business partner.
In between real estate deals, the couple had 3 children and the family lived the high life, splitting time between their Beverly Hills mansion and a luxurious beach home in Malibu.
Donald Sterling had become a big player in LA, so he started rubbing elbows with high-powered businessmen like Jerry Buss.
Jerry Buss was a talented, charismatic guy, and he was successful in everything he did. He was really about the same age as Donald Sterling, and he also built an impressive real estate portfolio.
Buss was also making inroads in a new venture, NBA team ownership. In 1977, LA Lakers owner Jack Cook was looking to sell the team. Buss was interested, and to raise the $67.5 million in cash, he conducted a flurry of real estate deals, including one with Donald Sterling in 1979.
Buss had almost all the money he needed to close the deal, but he was still coming up short. So he ended up brokering another deal with Donald Sterling to sell 11 of his buildings for $2.7 million to give him the last of the money he needed to get across the finish line.
Buss purchased not only the Lakers, but the LA Kings hockey team and the Los Angeles Forum Arena from Jack Cook in 1979 for $67.5 million.
This was the biggest deal in sports history and laid the foundation for what was one of the most profitable franchises in all of professional sports. And this was largely because Jerry Buss was a good owner.
Being a good owner is about winning, period. If you're winning, your city, your fans, the team, everybody will get behind you.
With a little help from guys like Irving Magic Johnson and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the Lakers became one of the most exciting teams in the NBA.
Ford sends it to Kareem. Skyhook up and good. Lakers win.
With sold-out games and major television coverage, Jerry Buss and his Lakers were raking in the cash.
Jerry Buss saw what owning a professional team would reap him financially. So he got Sterling to come in because he wanted him to be part of the ball owners club. And Sterling obviously said, "There's money involved? Sure, I'm in."
The San Diego Clippers were on the market, but at the time, they were far from a standout team, only winning 35 of their 82 games in the 1979-1980 season. But seeing Buss's financial success in LA, Sterling saw an opportunity and purchased the team for $13.5 million in 1981.
Owning a professional sports team meant being part of a highly exclusive club. Donald Sterling became a member of the elite.
Donald Sterling was used to being the king of his own castle. His wife, Shelly Sterling, was a very dedicated business partner to him. He ran his law firm and his real estate business with very little oversight from anyone else. But the NBA doesn't work that way. They know who you're paying money to, who you owe money to, and how you're interacting with others in the NBA. All of a sudden, there was a lot of accountability involved.
Right away, it was clear that Sterling was only interested in playing by his own rules and skirting the rest. But what was even more shocking was that as an owner of a professional sports team, he didn't even seem to care about winning.
Donald Sterling realized, I don't have to spend a heck of a lot of money to build a team. I'm still going to make a lot of money. It doesn't make a difference if I win or I lose.
Winning would have increased profits through things like merchandising, better ticket sales, sponsorships, and more. But Donald Sterling took a different view. He felt that it wasn't cost-effective to invest in making the Clippers into a winning franchise. In his first season, Donald Sterling famously asked the head coach if they needed an athletic trainer on staff. He asked the coach if he could just tape up the players himself. I mean, it was ludicrous. He slashed training camp expenses from $50,000 down to $100 and would not spend money to get the good players on the roster. This meant that the Clippers consistently finished in last place.
Being in last place really didn't bother Donald Sterling because in the NBA, the profits were distributed equally no matter if your team came in first place or last. Donald Sterling was making huge loads of money no matter what.
They had 17 wins and 65 losses during his first season as owner. As if that wasn't enough, Sterling was recorded during an NBA luncheon commenting that he was fine with losing. It was actually part of his plan. This didn't exactly endear him to the other team owners.
Donald Sterling openly admitted to purposely losing games in order to get better draft picks. Now, these draft picks were very valuable, but while they didn't cost Donald Sterling anything, he would then turn around and sell the draft picks to the highest bidder.
Sterling would get players with high potential on short-term rookie contracts for cheap, then dump them when their contracts became more expensive.
A lot of people would probably call him a cheapskate. In 1981, he refused to pay $1,000 to somebody who won a free throw contest that he sponsored. That's just the way he usually operated.
He also plotted to move the team from San Diego to Los Angeles without the league's permission. This is a big no-no.
In September of 1982, a special NBA committee of team owners met to discuss Sterling's future with the league. It seemed they had had enough.
They knew what they were dealing with, and I think that they sensed that things were only going to get worse.
A group of 6 NBA owners recommended that Donald Sterling's ownership be terminated. The owners claimed that Sterling was bad for business.
The NBA committee ultimately gave Sterling a slap on the wrist for his inappropriate comments about purposely tanking the team to get a better draft pick. They hit him with a $10,000 fine, but allowed him to keep his team, perhaps with a little help from an old friend.
One of the main reasons that Donald Sterling remained an NBA owner was the clout of Jerry Buss. He had so much power that Donald Sterling kept his gig.
But the calm was short-lived. Just a year later, Donald Sterling was back going toe-to-toe with the league, this time with $100 million on the line.
He really wanted to ride the coattails of his friend Jerry Buss.
On Fortune Fights, husband and wife attorneys Danielle and Andy Mayoris examined the legal battles of the rich and famous. By the late 1970s, Donald Sterling had it all. A successful law firm, a massive real estate portfolio, and millions of dollars in the bank. In 1981, he added NBA team owner to his resume after purchasing the San Diego Clippers for a cool $13.5 million.
Donald Sterling failed to reinvest much money, if any, into his team.
In his first season as owner, the Clippers were the second worst team in the league, winning only 17 out of 82 games. But rather than focusing on his failing team, Sterling was working on something else.
Sterling and the team president recognized that San Diego did not have a large sports market. He wanted to move the franchise over to Los Angeles, where his good friend Jerry Buss was cashing in with the Lakers.
Sterling had previously talked about moving the team back in 1982, but he didn't follow through with his plan. That same year, however, a legal case brought forth against the National Football League by Al Davis, owner of the Oakland Raiders football team, would help give Donald Sterling and other professional team owners new rights when it came to relocating their teams.
In 1982, Al Davis, the owner of the Oakland Raiders, wanted to move his team from Oakland to Los Angeles, so he filed a lawsuit against the NFL, accusing them of violating antitrust laws.
Any franchise move had to be approved by the NBA itself. So the league was shocked when they learned Sterling was again trying to move the team without their permission in 1984.
The NBA did not like being left in the dark, so they imposed a fine on Donald Sterling of $25 million.
Sterling fired back, suing the NBA and the 22 other teams for $100 million, claiming that the league was conspiring to eliminate his franchise.
Donald Sterling took a page from Al Davis's playbook and used the antitrust angle against the NBA, and it worked. The NBA let Donald Sterling move the team to Los Angeles like he wanted.
When Sterling came into San Diego, he promised the city that he was going to turn the team around and that he and the team were there to stay. Now, just a few years later, he was breaking his promises and ready to walk away.
Even local news commentators were getting in on the action, making fun of, quote, Big Dumb Don on the air.
Bus gonna make a joke of this basketball sport while I drink my wine on the side of the court.
Big Don.
Big Dumb Don.
Even after the move to Los Angeles, the Clippers remained one of the worst teams in the league.
They were the laughingstock, not only the NBA, they were the laughingstock of sports.
Meanwhile, win or lose, Donald Sterling was raking in the cash from the shared league profits. By 2006, The Clippers were bringing in more than $90 million a year. Once the bills were paid, that all went into Sterling's pocket.
The NBA was making millions and millions of dollars through television deals, merchandise, and ticket sales. And Donald Sterling, as one of the NBA team owners, was going to get a cut of all of this. But unlike some of the other owners, Sterling wasn't going to turn around and reinvest his earnings into his own team.
He created a tough environment for anybody trying to run the team, especially the coaches. He loved to show up at practices and unleash profanity-laced tirades at the players. And if the coaches tried to intervene, he would tell them to shut up.
According to his former general manager, Elgin Baylor, Sterling would bring women into the locker room after games to entice players with them.
What would he say?
Oh, look at those beautiful black bodies. On several occasions, I told him not to. The players were, they were mad, and he kept doing it.
Complaints directed at Sterling weren't just coming from his basketball team. Through the years, tenants from his more than 150 rental properties had spoken out against giant rent hikes, poor living conditions, and various forms of harassment.
Donald himself would reportedly even show up, and if he saw the smallest infraction, like somebody with a potted plant on the balcony, he would use that for a basis to evict them.
You would think that someone with billions of dollars would have something better to do with his time and his money.
The most disturbing thing about these complaints is that they primarily came from people of color. They claimed that Sterling and his company refused to do repairs if the people complaining were either Hispanic or African American.
In 2009, the U.S. Department of Justice indicted Sterling on charges of housing discrimination within his vast network of real estate properties.
One of Sterling's former property managers claimed Sterling said black tenants, quote, smell and are, quote, not clean, and that Mexicans, quote, just sit around and drink and smoke all day.
He then went even further, saying that he only intended to rent to Koreans because they will pay the rent and live in whatever conditions I give them.
Sterling denied the accusations, but agreed to pay the suit.
Donald Sterling was forced to pay over $2.7 million.
The incident only further tarnished his reputation in the NBA.
It really was a slap in the face to his entire team and the players in the NBA.
On top of Sterling's public embarrassments, Sterling had done little to hide his philandering from his wife, Shelly.
Donald Sterling openly kept a harem of mistresses, and at least in one case with his mistress, Alexandra Castro, he had her sign a quote-unquote friendship agreement just so there would be no confusion. This agreement was her acknowledging that he wasn't going to leave his wife for her. Even though this sounds crazy, it's actually a legally binding document.
At one point, Sterling actually sued Castro to reclaim a gift he had given to her of a $1 million home. And it really shows Sterling's mindset. He's got the money to pay for lawyers and drag somebody through an expensive lawsuit, and he knew that Castro wouldn't be able to keep up with him.
When millionaires and billionaires have mistresses and girlfriends, they want to protect themselves and their businesses, their wives, their family life. So of course, all sorts of agreements can be put into place to try and protect their investment.
By April of 2013, Sterling's affairs became too much for his wife to handle.
I always thought that maybe it would go away.
Yet despite her husband's infidelity and the public chaos that seemed to follow him, Shelly Sterling chose not to get a divorce.
I was all ready to file. My attorney and my financial advisor said, now is not the time.
She was apparently advised to stay married, but live a separate life from her husband. It's likely because their business interests were so intertwined.
Shelly Sterling married her husband when he didn't have a penny to his name, and she was critical to his success.
At the time, the Sterling empire was worth just under $2 billion. Considering herself an equal partner in the business, Shelly wasn't willing to risk losing any of it. Living separate lives in the spring of 2013 allowed Sterling to continue a relationship with aspiring model 31-year-old V. Stiviano, who he reportedly met at the 2010 Super Bowl.
V. Stiviano was born Maria Vanessa Perez, and she moved from San Antonio to Los Angeles, where she did some modeling and lived a lot of her life as a socialite.
Oddly enough, V. Stiviano met Donald Sterling through Jerry Buss, and at one time she was even the director of the Donald T. Sterling Charitable Foundation.
Sometimes people can understand our relationship. I'm his everything. Our relationship started off me working for Mr. Sterling and his nonprofit organization, the Donald T. Sterling Foundation, and it's evolved to so much more.
Mixing business with pleasure, Sterling showered Stiviano with extravagant gifts, including a $1.8 million duplex. So Shelly Sterling decided to bring legal charges against her husband's mistress.
Donald bought her 3 cars, a Ferrari, 2 Bentleys, a Range Rover, jewelry, many things. And I felt I wanted my 50% back.
Perhaps Shelly Sterling truly did look at her marriage as a business, and she was trying to protect her stake in it by suing Stiviano.
In California, community property is equally owned by both spouses. That means it can't be gifted away by only one spouse without the other's consent.
Stiviano was ordered to give back the $1.8 million Spanish-style duplex that Sterling had bought her, and $800,000 to cover the other goods that he paid for. Shelly said that she would donate the proceeds to charity. Shelly was making a statement that this was about principle. It was not about the money.
She clearly helped to build this empire, and she was not going to let anything tear it down.
Essentially, she was saying, if you're a gold digger, don't bother having an affair with my husband, because if you do and he gives you gifts, I'm just going to sue and get them back anyways.
With the lawsuit pending, Sterling stopped his gift giving, but remained in contact with his mistress.
Just after Stiviano was cut off by Sterling, he had a Clippers employee reach out to her by text to see if she needed anything.
She responded saying no, and then taunted in a text message, "Let the games begin."
In 2014, Los Angeles Clippers owner, 80-year-old Donald Sterling, found himself in the spotlight once again for the wrong reason. His wife of nearly 60 years had brought a very public $2.8 million lawsuit against Sterling's mistress, 31-year-old V. Stiviano, seeking to recoup gifts paid for with money from the marital community property. Attorneys Andy and Danielle Mayoris walk us through the bitter fight over the fortune Sterling had spent on his mistress, a fight that would lead Sterling further into infamy.
She was sending a message to other mistresses and gold diggers down the road not to mess with her, her marital estate, or her husband.
Donald Sterling had an employee reach out to Stiviano to check on her. She responded with a taunting text message, "Let the games begin."
Stiviano did not take the lawsuit lying down. Instead, she brought out the big guns to ensure that she wouldn't be cut out.
Stiviano sent a Clippers team employee a 9-minute audio recording that sounded like a conversation between her and Donald Sterling.
People call you and tell you that I have black people on my Instagram, and it bothers you.
Yeah, it bothers me a lot that you want to broadcast that you're associating with black people. You don't have to.
Other comments were believed to be in reference to one of Stiviano's Instagram posts, where she posed with basketball legend Magic Johnson.
And I took a picture with someone I admire.
Good.
And he happens to be black, and I'm sorry.
I think it's nice that you admire him. I know him well, and he should be admired. And I'm just saying that it's too bad you can't admire him privately and during your entire life, your whole life, admire him. Bring him here, feed him, him. I don't care. You can do anything. But don't put him on Instagram so the world has to see, so they have to call me. And don't bring him into my games, okay?
Sterling's words were more than shocking. They were appalling. And the Clippers immediately took action and began to investigate, and then turned it over to the NBA.
But on April 25th, 2016, before the league could get a handle on things, the recording was leaked to TMZ and posted on their website.
You associate with black people.
I'm not you, and you're not me. You're supposed to be a delicate white or a delicate Latina girl.
I'm a mixed girl.
It was Radio Gold. We played it on 97.1 The Ticket every morning for at least a week.
It was chaos, and once the bomb goes off, you can't go back and fix it. Sterling's life would never be the same.
There's no negativity. I love everybody. I'm just saying, in your lousy Instagrams, you don't have to have yourself with walking with black people. You don't have to.
The intersection of sports and media made this a topic for weeks on all the major cable networks.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar on the show Hardball with Chris Matthews said that the Donald Sterling ownership was like a plantation.
Sterling's comments were especially devastating because he built most of his fortune through the NBA based on the talent and athleticism of African-American athletes.
Donald Sterling had been known and had been on record as making racist statements. It was a huge embarrassment for the NBA. It became clear as the days and weeks went on that Donald Sterling had to be disassociated from the Clippers at all costs.
There was no way that Sterling could survive in the NBA world after these comments leaked.
Ironically, the Clippers were doing well in the 2014 season, winning 57 games and were on their way to the playoffs. However, the release of Sterling's recording left the players in a tough position.
The Clipper players talked about boycotting, but they were in the playoffs. The Clippers in the playoffs, it's unbelievable. But they had this crazy owner, they didn't know what to do. So instead of boycott, because it would have hurt their big moment, they decided to wear their jerseys inside out so you couldn't see the Clipper logo in protest of their owner, Donald T. Sterling.
Across the league, other players stood in solidarity with the Clippers, turning their warm-up uniforms inside out. Even the president weighed in.
When ignorant folks want to advertise their ignorance, you don't really have to do anything, you just let them talk. And that's what happened here.
Within the NBA, the league's new commissioner, Adam Silver, had only been on the job for 2 months when the story broke.
Adam Silver had just become the commissioner of the NBA, taking over for David Stern. So he had to decide on the Sterling situation. This was going to be a landmark decision for Silver's career. Because Commissioner Silver knew that he was going to get into this huge legal battle with Donald Sterling, he had to get some more ammunition, legal ammunition, so he wouldn't lose this fight.
In the public's eyes, his racism was evident. But the NBA needed more concrete ammunition, and it came in the form of lost team sponsorship.
When the scandal broke, more than a dozen sponsors of the Clippers suspended or canceled their relationship with the franchise.
Sponsors of the Clippers decided to make their move a lot faster than typically happens. And that's because they understood what they were dealing with. They had worked with Donald Sterling and his advisors and his legal team for a long time. So they suspected that more shoes were going to drop and that they were dealing with something that could go out of control rather quickly.
Now the NBA could claim that Sterling was bad for the league's bottom line, and they could point to the lost sponsorship revenue as evidence.
On April 27, 2014, just 2 days after the audio recording was made public, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver addressed the press.
There are broad powers in place under the NBA's constitution and bylaws that include a range of sanctions, and all of those will be considered depending on the findings of our investigation.
That investigation wrapped up just 2 days later. The commissioner went back in front of the cameras and dropped a bombshell.
Effective immediately, I am banning Mr. Sterling for life from any association with the Clippers organization or the NBA. Mr. Sterling may not attend any NBA games, and he may not participate in any business or player personnel decisions involving the team.
Silver also made it clear that Sterling's ownership of the team would be next on the chopping block.
I will urge the Board of Governors to force a sale of the team, and will do everything in my power to ensure that that happens.
Following the announcement, Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti gave his own statement to the press.
So I want to personally thank Commissioner Silver for bringing down the hammer, for being as strong as he could be, for saying that none of us as Americans, and certainly not as Angelenos, will stand for the sort of racism that we heard articulated.
Donald Sterling had fouled out, but he wasn't leaving the game without a fight.
I never dreamt that this could happen. It's a terrible, terrible nightmare.
In April 2014, an audio recording of Los Angeles Clippers owner Donald Sterling making racist comments while speaking to his then mistress, V. Stiviano, was leaked to the press.
People call you and tell you that I have black people on my Instagram, and it bothers you.
Yeah, it bothers me a lot that you want to broadcast that you're associating with black people. Do you have to?
After a brief investigation, the NBA fined Sterling $2.5 million and banned him from the league for life. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver also made it clear that he intended to use all power necessary to force the sale of the team.
The NBA Constitution is written in such a way to protect the integrity of the league and the other owners and their interests with their franchises. So it says that if any owner violates contractual obligations in a way that adversely affects the league or the other franchises, then they can force that owner to sell. And if 3/4 of them vote in favor to terminate the person's franchise, they can force the owner to sell.
A month after dismissal from the NBA, Sterling did an interview with CNN's Anderson Cooper to tell his side of the story and to discuss his comments about Magic Johnson.
What has he done? Can you tell me? Big Magic Johnson. Well, what kind of a guy goes to every city, has sex with every girl?
It was evident that Donald Sterling didn't have a strategy. He was employing tactic after tactic. He was winging it. And this is something you see frequently with rich, successful men who believe in themselves so strongly. And so for Donald Sterling, this was just another episode he could talk his way out of.
I made a terrible, terrible mistake. Because I'm not a racist. And I've never been a racist. Am I entitled to one mistake? Am I, after 35 years? I mean, I love my league, I love my partners. Am I entitled to one mistake? It's a terrible mistake.
But Sterling couldn't talk his way out of this one. And with more public fallout following the CNN interview, none other than Shelly stepped up to salvage her family's investment.
A day after the CNN interview, in an effort to protect their ownership of the team and their family fortune, Shelly appeared on the news and said that she believed that Sterling was suffering from dementia.
That's when I thought he has dementia.
In June 2014, Shelly had Donald examined by physicians to assess his mental health.
There's a standardized mini mental examination that is often used by doctors and elder law attorneys to help determine the level of capacity that a person has. It's far from comprehensive and often will just scratch the surface of how competent or incompetent somebody really is.
The lower the score, the more likely that a patient had dementia.
Sterling scored a 23 out of 30 on the test. This suggested that he had developed a mild form of dementia.
With a score of 23, he was definitely borderline, although the score is more concerning given his high education. You would expect someone with his education and intelligence to normally score higher, so the borderline score is more indicative of dementia than it would be for someone with a lower IQ or less education.
For Shelly Sterling, the test was not only about her husband's mental health, but also his ability to make decisions regarding their $2 billion estate. Just 4 months before the scandal broke, Donald and Shelly had put their estate, including the Clippers team ownership, into a jointly controlled trust.
A trust is a legal document that you can create to control your assets both during your lifetime and after you pass away. For individuals with high net worth like Sterling, they often will use multiple trusts to take advantage of estate tax planning to help maximize what their heirs inherit.
As a condition of the trust, it was agreed that if either Donald or Shelly were to become incapacitated and unable to make decisions regarding the trust, their condition would need to be recognized by 2 independent physicians. After Donald's initial mental evaluation showed signs of dementia, Shelly pushed for more testing.
It's very common for trust documents to require 2 different doctors to sign off on somebody being incompetent and incapable of acting as trustee. This is done to protect that person because it's not hard to find one doctor to say anything. So by requiring 2 doctors to have to sign off on it, it's really a protection for the person whose competency is in question.
Sterling also underwent diagnostic testing, including 2 brain scans at the hospital. This revealed brain atrophy consistent with Alzheimer's disease.
Based on all of the testing, the 2 doctors concluded that Sterling was incapable of managing his affairs.
So Shelly was able to oust him, and he couldn't even go to court to challenge the finding that he wasn't capable of acting as a co-trustee.
Donald Sterling had lost control of his empire.
Sterling became irate. He called the 2 doctors who evaluated him and left them threatening messages claiming what they did was unethical. He accused them of conspiring with his wife and felt that whatever his medical condition was should be kept private.
I never dreamt that this could happen. It's a terrible, terrible nightmare.
But when he created the trust, Sterling had signed away his right to such privacy. When he couldn't go after the doctors, he went after his wife.
In one of his legal documents to the court, Sterling said that he signed the trust at the behest of Shelly, and it was only done a few months before. So in 4 months, he went from being competent enough to sign a complicated legal document, which was the trust, to being unable to make decisions for himself. He also said that Shelly deceived him into getting the PET and CT scans as just routine, when she was really doing it for the purposes of removing him as co-trustee.
Donald Sterling's accusations against Shelly about the trust actually have some merit when you consider the fact that Alzheimer's disease and dementia are gradually progressing diseases typically. They usually don't happen overnight. It's not like he woke up the day before he made these comments that were recorded and all of a sudden had dementia or Alzheimer's disease. There had to be something going on with Donald Sterling medically for some time.
You have to wonder if Shelly Sterling knew her husband was going down the road of dementia when he signed the trust documents 4 months earlier. Did she already have a master plan in place?
Whatever Shelly Sterling's motives, she found herself in control of the Clippers, at least until the owners voted.
It means a lot, and it's my passion, and I love it, and it's my legacy to my family.
But even with her at the helm, as part of Donald Sterling's dismissal from the league, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver had made it clear that he would force the sale of the team, backed by a 3/4 majority of other team owners. Sterling's children, Joanna and Chris, weren't interested in the family business and didn't take sides on the sale. His other son, Scott, had died of a drug overdose in 2013.
Donald Sterling had agreed to let his wife take over the affairs of the team. Shelly Sterling knew that the league was going to force them to sell, so she beat them to the punch and decided, we're going to sell first on our terms.
Just 2 months earlier, the Milwaukee Bucks had sold for $550 million, setting a new NBA record.
Selling a team in Los Angeles, the nation's second largest sports market, would be a very lucrative payday, especially with guys like Blake Griffin and Chris Paul on the team. I mean, they took the Clippers to the second round of the playoffs that year.
That added up to a very valuable team, and commentators believe bidding could reach $1 billion.
There were 3 serious bids. The sale of the Clippers was imminent.
Still, Donald Sterling wasn't ready to bow out.
To stop the sale, Sterling actually tried to revoke the trust.
In April 2014, Los Angeles Clippers owner Donald Sterling was banned from the NBA after being recorded using racially charged slurs.
I'm sorry that you still have people around you that are full of racism and hate in their hearts. I'm sorry that you're still racist in your heart.
When his wife Shelly came to his defense, saying he was mentally incapacitated, she put in motion a battle over their shared fortune, which included ownership of the Clippers. After doctors found that Donald Sterling was mentally incapable of managing his affairs, Shelly gained control of the team and took over. Legal analysts and advisors, Danielle and Andy Mayoris, interpret how Donald Sterling's personal altercations altered his wallet.
Shelly Sterling's legal maneuverings regarding the trust were absolutely brilliant. She certainly was a smart and savvy businesswoman. Usually when these kind of things happen in the legal arena, they take months, if not years, to resolve. And she was able to maneuver this to a successful conclusion in a very short time frame. She has to get a lot of credit for this.
If the league and the commissioner were able to force the sale, then they wouldn't care about getting the highest bid. They would only want to get an owner who they trusted and who could do the sale quickly. Shelly Sterling knew this, so before they could force the sale, she went ahead and put the team up for sale herself. And then the bids started pouring in.
One group bid $1.2 billion, more than double the previous record paid for an NBA team.
Bids were coming in left and right. Elaine Wynn, the ex-wife of casino magnate Steve Wynn, made an offer of $1.6 billion. Even Oprah Winfrey was considering getting involved in the NBA.
David Geffen and Laureen Powell, Steve Jobs' widow, were also getting in on the action. Finally, there was Steve Ballmer, the recently retired CEO of Microsoft, who came in with an even bigger bid of $2 billion.
These offers were astronomical. Remember that Donald and Shelly Sterling paid $12.5 million for this franchise. So at the top offer, that's 160 times the amount that they paid for the franchise.
Ballmer's bid was enough for Shelly Sterling, but first it needed to be approved by the other team owners.
Miraculously, it was unanimous. All 29 said, sell the Clippers to Microsoft's Steve Ballmer.
The NBA owners, and for the commissioner, they had wanted to get rid of Donald Sterling for a while, so they took action. This was the incident that they needed. So for them, this episode actually turned out to be a gift.
Meanwhile, Donald Sterling was grasping at straws, acting like he still had control of the team. He scrambled to stop the sale because his professional strategy was always to buy and hold, never to sell. He could make a lot more money if he kept the team.
Sterling actually tried to revoke the trust, which is very interesting because you can't revoke a trust once you're found to be incapacitated under the terms of the trust. Shelly filed an ex parte petition seeking the court's approval for the sale to Ballmer. An ex parte petition is without notice to the other party. It's usually done in secret and in an expedited fashion.
Sterling then filed another lawsuit, adding to his previous ones, accusing the NBA Silver and Shelly of fraud.
The judge ruled against Sterling on every substantive issue to clear the way for Ballmer's purchase.
On May 29, 2014, the deal was official. For $2 billion, Steve Ballmer became the new owner of the Los Angeles Clippers.
In fact, the last franchise to sell before this sold for only 25% of the price that Shelly was able to arrange. The danger was if the sale didn't go through at that time, the whole thing may have been lost, and the franchise could have been sold at a fire sale for a fraction of the price.
In one transaction, Shelly Sterling effectively doubled the family's wealth from $2 to nearly $4 billion.
After the Clippers were sold to Ballmer, they were the toast of Tinseltown. The Lakers stunk. Everybody was talking Clippers. They had Chris Paul. They had Blake Griffin and others. Everybody loved the Clippers. They made the playoffs. Didn't win a championship, but at least they were fun and entertaining.
But just when it seemed like the family's embarrassing time in the public eye was over, Donald Sterling unleashed more lawsuits. This time against TMZ and his former mistress, V. Stiviano, in 2015.
Donald Sterling claimed that Stiviano never had his permission to record the conversation. But not only that, he actually accused her of doctoring the tape and putting words in there that he never really said.
In most states, only one party to the conversation has to give consent for it to be recorded. California is in the minority of states that require two-party consent.
Stiviano fired back, claiming she had Sterling's full permission to tape their conversations. She reported that she worked as his archivist and was asked by Sterling to record his conversations so that they could be played back if he were to forget what he had said.
This is really bizarre and hard to believe that he would agree to being recorded and then say such damaging and horrible things on recording.
Sterling, of course, was so upset that he tried to sue anybody and everybody he could. Once he realized that there was nobody he could point the finger at other than Stiviano, there was no reason to continue the case, and he dropped that as well.
Stiviano had already done the damage to him. Once the cat's out of the bag, you can't put it back in. His claim against Stiviano was uncollectible, and his claim against the NBA didn't have a leg to stand on.
And while it may seem that Donald Sterling was the big loser, the entire ordeal only helped his bottom line.
His net worth before the sale was $1.9 billion, and as of March 2017, his net worth stands at $3.5 billion. The sale of the Clippers was instrumental in Sterling's fortune. Because Shelly played it right, they actually came out of this chaos $2 billion ahead.
Donald Sterling will go down as the worst owner in sports, not just basketball, in all of sports. Unfortunately, the moral of the story is you can be the worst owner in professional sports history, your team can lose, you can get terminated as an owner, but you know what? You still come out smelling like a rose because you're richer now than you were before.
Sterling's situation is a prime example of why everyone with a significant amount of assets would benefit from a well-drafted revocable living trust. We're talking about assets in the hundreds of thousands of dollars range, not just millionaires and billionaires. Shelly maneuvered a very messy situation using the Sterling family trust like a master chess player.
In August 2015, Donald Sterling filed for divorce, but 7 months later, their lawyers announced that they had reconciled. The couple went on to live separate lives, and thanks to Shelly, their bank account, with nearly $4 billion, was bigger than ever.
I don't love him. I pity him, and I feel sorry for him.
How are you? We talk about your husband. This is a mess. How are you?
I'm fine, and I will be strong.
It's really interesting that someone who started from nothing and built his businesses up to be millions and then billions of dollars would be so carefree with what he said and did and not stop to think about the consequences. At the end of the day, Shelly saved Donald financially from himself, and in the process, she doubled the value of the Sterling family fortune.